All right, beautiful. Thank you again so much for being here. My name is Helen Ravernier. I know you haven't seen me yet. I'll be speaking a little bit later, but for now, we'll hand it over to Michelle, your tried and true leader.
Thank you so much, Helen. So, yeah, we are going to go and get started today. Just jump right into the content. As Helen mentioned, she will be doing the bulk of the presentation, especially as we talk about marketing and job announcements. But I really just want to do a few housekeeping, talk a little bit about the homework. We'll do a quick breakout group. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, as it says here, today, we're going to talk about the recruitment team, how to market your health center, and drafting job announcements. The recruitment team conversation is going to be really short, just a few key details, and then we'll move right into marketing and job announcements because I know that this was something that all of you mentioned that was a topic of great importance to all of you. I also do want to do our land acknowledgement. I realized this was on me that I accidentally did not include this in the first session. So while I usually don't read everything on a slide, I do want to read this. Just simply saying this meeting was planned on and is being presented from unceded territories of various Indigenous, Native American, and First Nation peoples. We humbly offer gratitude and respect to the elders, past and present citizens of these tribes, and to all Indigenous people that are historically and contemporarily tied to the lands that make up what is now called the United States. And I know we are all across the country, so very important to do that land acknowledgement. So if you were here in the first session, I know there were a few of you that weren't able to make it. We had just a few intro slides, housekeeping. I won't spend too much time on these, but there's just a few things I would like to address. So the session is being recorded. All of the slides and the recording are going to be posted on the discussion board. We did have some questions regarding the discussion board, so I want to clarify the role of the discussion board and what we have it, or why we have it. So we do use it as a repository for everything that we present here. So after we finish the session is when we post the slides, the recording, and then also any extra documents such as the assignments that you may have. If there are any type of resources that we may have discussed, we will put the link on there. The discussion board is also open for all of you to talk to each other, to get to know each other. We find that in each cohort that really differs on what people prefer around that. So if there is something where you want to start a discussion with your fellow cohort, please go ahead and post that question on the discussion board. We would be able to see it. And then also it would prompt me and the rest of the faculty here to either bring that into discussion during the live sessions or answer on the discussion board. So we really want to make it something that works for all of you. But for the main part, really, it's going to be that repository that'll keep all of the materials, and you'll get them after the session is finished. So there won't be anything ahead of time. Now, if all of you feel like you really would prefer something ahead of time, please just let us know. Let us know in the chat, or you can contact us directly. And I'm happy to be flexible with all of that. So as we talked about before, please be present, be on camera if you can. We want to make this interactive. So use the chat box, unmute yourself, just the same way that we did that before. Oh, and Danielle, please go ahead.
Okay, so I didn't know if maybe I was looking at the wrong thing for the discussion board, but I looked on it after our session was over last week and I looked at it before we came on today, and I didn't say anything on there because I couldn't see if there was a question or a prompt, and I didn't know if I was looking at the wrong thing.
Oh, okay. So there won't be a question or a prompt prior to the session. What we do is once we get the recording, all the materials we posted after, and you didn't see anything at all like for session one, none of that.
No, all I
Okay,
saw, like on the discussion part at least, was just Mariah and her, profile, and then it was just
right.
blank afterwards. And then I looked at
Oh,
resources as well, and
and I see in
and
the
it
chat,
just
yep,
yeah.
that
Um
apparently the same thing happened to several people.
So,
Um,
okay, so it looks like everything is in the resources section of that.
That's where it should be. But you know what? Now that I see that it's happening to multiple of you where you're not seeing anything, let us go in after this session and see what is going on. So under resources, that's where you should be able to find for each specific session, you know, the
Okay.
slides, the recording, those type of things. But if you're not seeing anything, then it seems like something is going on. So I can troubleshoot with Mariah. Yeah, and I see Mariah said, that's odd. I'll take a look. Yeah, something may be going on like the backside of the discussion board where, you know, we think we're posting and unfortunately nobody is seeing any of that. So if it is okay with everyone, what we're going to do is we're going to go in, we're going to see what is going on, and then we'll reach out to everyone. But thank you for letting us know. And Danielle, thank you for saying that, because we didn't realize nobody could see anything on the discussion board. Definitely. We will, yeah, we'll go in, we'll have, you know, Mariah, who is like our tech guru, she'll go in, make sure everything works. And I may even, if we need, do some testing with some postings. So if you get any notifications of postings or anything like that, it may be me just testing to make sure that everybody has access to it, if that's okay with everyone. Oh, and Genevieve, yes, absolutely. Please, please, please eat. That is very, very important. Anybody who needs to be off camera to have any food or anything, please go ahead. But yes, thank you for letting us know. We will make sure to reach out to everyone and we'll get all this fixed. If we find that for some reason something really is going on with the discussion board, what we'll do is make sure to send you the materials through email. So at least you'll be able to have that. Wonderful, thanks. Oh, and I see something else in the chat. Okay, so Lori said, I did post on the discussion board this morning around my struggles with passwords. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna have to go in and see what is going on and why we're having that issue, but we will definitely troubleshoot and get this all taken care of. And my sincerest apologies, did not realize we were having that technical difficulty, everyone. Okay, so we also did this slide before. It really is just, you know, and I think we've already done a great job of this. Just be present, listen, share, really think outside the box, be gracious of one another. And then right here, if you have any tech issues, please let us know. We're here to support and really learn, you know, from each other. So again, we'll make sure to take care of everything with the discussion board. But yeah, at any point, just step in, ask any questions, put anything in the chat. So we went through all this in the first session. So I'm not going to go through all of these slides again, but just so you know, we are ACU, Association of Clinicians for the Underserved. And the program that brings you here is the STAR Center. So you have our website, our contact information if you needed. This is the wonderful STAR Center team. I believe we have everybody online except for possibly Suzanne Spear, who's our senior director, but you can reach out to any of us at any point. Be happy to answer any of your questions. And then these are just those intro slides again, like what are the goals of the recruitment bootcamp, just as we went through last week, the different tools that we use. So for example, the live webinars that we have now, you know, we want to always have time for discussion. If you need technical assistance, I do want to remind everyone we do that 3 to 6 month follow-up after the learning collaborative ends. These are the learning objectives and outcomes. So really, we're looking as special considerations for recruiting and retaining mental health providers, and then having you start building that personalized plan, the recruitment plan for seeking out mental health providers, or really anybody in the mental health staff. And then this slide, as I had before, this is really just what is a comprehensive workforce plan? How does it all fit together? And the point of this is just to remind you all those different assignments and the tables and everything that we're going to be working on throughout these 4 weeks. We want you to write it down and we want you to keep it in your comprehensive workforce plan. So And speaking of tech issues, I realized because the initial homework was doing the self-assessment. And normally what happens when someone completes the self-assessment on our website, I get an email that just says, a self-assessment was completed. And apparently there was a glitch on that. So I think there may be something that is going on with the website, but I did want to just open it up to the room to see if anybody had any questions about the homework or any successes or challenges when you did the self-assessment that you found that you would like to share with us, or just in general, any questions that you may have. So I really just want to leave this time for all of you, and I'll give everyone a little bit of time to gather questions if they do have something. And also, as I mentioned, the self-assessment was really just to have that baseline of where you currently stand in your recruitment and retention at your health center, which I think is really going to help you with a lot of the other assignments that we're going to be working on. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat. I don't see any hands up. I'll give it just another second. Oh, yes. So I see Sharon said it was a challenge pulling together the demographics. Absolutely. So one thing that you'll find, and our hope with this learning collaborative, is that a lot of those things that do take time, that are a little bit more challenging to get that information, that you've already taken that first step. So as you continue to work on your comprehensive workforce plan, putting together all these documents for recruiting your mental health providers and mental health staff, you don't have to recreate the wheel every time. So we definitely understand, like, some of the information gathering is time consuming and also challenging. And it's also okay if you don't have everything. That's another thing that we are aware of. Some people will have more information than others depending on their role in the health center. And then Roxanne said, no questions, just confirmation that we organization need help and guidance to improve. Yes. And that's really the key of what this self-assessment is trying to get to, is just to give you just a general and better understanding. Where do you currently stand? Where is your workforce planning? Where is your recruitment and retention? And this, not only will you be able to use in recruiting the mental health providers and the mental health staff, but also just across the board in your health center. So we find that this just gives people really great information that they can take back to their health center and use. But Sharon and Roxanne, thank you so much for sharing that. And then also, Sharon, if you have any difficulty like pulling together some of the information or anything like that that you may not be able to get, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy, to help you sort of figure out, like, either who you may be able to reach out to or how to kind of go around those questions at the moment so that you can still get what you need out of it. And then Lori, so the self-assessment was actually the first assignment. It was in the yeah, thank you, Danielle. Perfect. It was in the initial PowerPoint for session 1. It'll be in this PowerPoint as well. It is hyperlinked there, but it's also in the discussion board. And I'm going to ask if anybody from the Star Center team, if you could put the direct link to the self-assessment in the chat as well, that would be great. But Lori, you can find it either in session 1's PowerPoint or session 2's PowerPoint that we'll be posting after this in the discussion board under the resources tab, as Danielle mentioned, and someone from the team will also post the link on here. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. So I always like to do like a little icebreaker. Thank you, Helen. Really appreciate that. So just as we did before, we're going to have just a few Mentimeter questions. And it's going to be another like little game again, as we did before. And then let me see, there's something else in the chat. Thank you, Alex. So Alex put the direct link for the Mentimeter on there. I am going to stop sharing, and I am going to go ahead and jump over to our Mentimeter slide. So just give me 1 second, everybody. oops, you're going to be seeing the back end of the slide. Okay, so everybody should be able to see my screen now. Can everyone see? I think. Oop, did it not pop up? Oh, yes, there we go. So what is mental health awareness, or what month is mental health awareness month on? I just realized that's a very poorly worded question. My apologies. I was trying to say, what month out of the year do we have mental health awareness? There's always one month where we celebrate this. Okay. Oh, it was supposed to pop up the answer and it didn't. So the month is actually May. I was hoping it would come up as, it was supposed to have the different months, but it didn't show. So I see Terry, Roxanne, Danielle, Earthman, and Vanessa. I'm assuming all of you did a great job. So thank you for that. And then let's see in the chat, Genevieve put October and Joanna put October. So nationally it is in May, and it's been celebrated in May throughout. And then of course there's a lot of different other months that celebrate different parts of mental health. So thank you everyone for that. And then let's stop sharing and go back to the presentation. Okay. So as I mentioned, I just wanted to do that little icebreaker for everyone. There were two other Mentimeter slides that after we talk about the recruitment team, I'm going to have y'all answer before then we go into some breakout groups. But let's go ahead and get started with the content. So when we are looking at recruiting behavioral health or mental health providers and their staff, I think if you remember last time I had that recruitment ladder. So one of the first steps that you really, really need to consider and keep focus on is building your recruitment team. So most of you probably already have a core group of people that are working on your recruitment team. My assumption is probably, those who are in HR, probably whatever position it is, that hiring manager, if you have a workforce person. But it's really, really important that you create a team in advance. And really the key part that I want you to think about when you are looking at building a recruitment team, and this will play into the job announcement part in a little bit, is have the key decision makers at the table with you. So we highly recommend that when you're building the recruitment team, when you're writing job announcements, anything along those lines, that you also have someone from the behavioral health department as part of the team. Now, they don't have to do everything in the same way, for example, that the hiring manager would do or that the HR director may do. But let's say you're hiring for a new therapist. Bring into your recruitment team somebody who has either the same or very similar job as you're trying to recruit for, and have them review the job announcement. For example, they will have the best idea on what does it really mean to do this job on a day-to-day basis. What do you need? What are the skills that are needed? They can help you with the language. So you have to be really intentional about who you're bringing in, and make sure as you do that, you clarify the roles and responsibilities in a very clear way. So people don't think, here I am working as a therapist and now I have this added on job that's not usually what I do. Make sure to explain to people, like, we're bringing you on because we know you have the expertise here. We just want you to review our job announcement, or we want you to be part of the interview process. That can be something that is very, very highly valuable, again, because they know the role the best. They will know what questions to ask, and they will help in identifying the right candidates for that position. The other thing too, I would say, and we've had this in some of our previous learning collaboratives, we had a health center that actually included their behavioral health director as a standing part of their recruitment team, regardless of what position it was. And the reason that they did that is because individuals in behavioral health, like, we're trained really well to look at different communication styles, nonverbal communication. They found having someone with that skill set in their recruitment team to be incredibly valuable overall in everything that they did when it came to bringing in new people to their health center. So again, this is a really short part of the presentation, but it's really important that before you get everything going, you have to make sure you have the right people in the right place. And that really helps with that smooth process. And actually, rather than going back to Mentimeter, so we don't have to go back and forth, and I can send you all into breakout groups. One of the things I just want to ask, and if all of you could write this in the chat, are you currently including people in that role as part of your recruitment team, or do they play any type of role, like whether it's, reviewing the job announcement or anything like that? Are you currently doing that? And you could say yes, no, expand on it. Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. That is wonderful. Okay, this is great. Only for the behavioral health team. Got it. Great, perfect. Has input. We currently include team members. Wonderful. So this is great, sort of. Okay, perfect. Yeah, and however you do it, it really will depend on what works for you and your health center. But one thing I really, really do recommend, because oftentimes, we only focus in on the behavioral health director, the behavioral health supervisor, whoever's in more of that supervisory role, at minimum, someone who has that same title, or again, that same role that you are looking for, to have them read over the job announcement can be very, very helpful. We say this, for example, if you're bringing in a medical assistant, have another medical assistant review that job announcement, where we usually don't do that in the process. We only focus on the directors and the supervisors. It can be very valuable to help, to have someone who can help with that process. And then Anisha says, recruitment in our org is a work in progress. This had been left to the departmental managers previously, but no standardization. Yeah, and and that's another thing. That's a big part of the learning collaborative. It's helping you standardize that, put together those processes. So when you go back to your health center, at least you have that starting point. So yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. So what I am going to do now, because I really, like I said, I wanted to go through this a little bit quickly so that we can have the bulk of the time for the job announcements. I want to send everyone over just for 10 minutes into breakout rooms again. And you may not be with the same people as before, just so you know, it's going to be the same process. And I just want you to discuss with your group, what are your current processes for drafting job announcements? Have you found anything successful, anything that may have been a challenge? And the reason for this is, when we get back, we'll probably ask like 1 or 2 people to report out. And I think it's really going to enhance the conversation that Helen is going to lead regarding drafting job announcements. Oh, and I see that there is something in the chat. And then Emily said, we often have behavioral health who has been with the company for several years sit on the interview. Perfect. Yes, exactly. Just, people who are knowledgeable at that role, have them be part of the interview, the job announcement drafting, whatever it may be. So what time is it now? It is, well, at least where I am, it's 2:25. So we're going to have everybody go into the breakout rooms just for 10 minutes, have a really kind of high level discussion, and then we will come back and I will pass it over to Helen.
I believe everyone is back, so welcome and thank you. So before we launch into our marketing and branding content, does anyone, I'll ask like 2 people to share what you learned, how your breakout group went, or not necessarily what you learned, but like what you all discussed, how did it go? Yeah, that good stuff. Any volunteers?
So
Yeah.
from the group that I was with, we talked about the fact that some have influence or from their behavioral health staff, whereas some of us have templated job descriptions with little room for creativity. The one thing I discovered is I'm a unionized labor force, which has certain constrictions, whereas the other people in my breakout room didn't have a unionized labor force. I'm a 700 strong person company, and each one of my partners were substantially smaller. So those were some of the comparisons and some of the dynamics.
Yeah, interesting.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you. And then Jay, did you want to share?
Yeah, thank you. There was a couple of us kind of were in agreement of like that it does tend to work better for the people who are in the position of either a behavioral health director or a behavioral health provider, and then any other like program supervisor kind of people to craft the job listing, the job posting, that tends to work out better versus HR crafting it. Or I mean, every HR is a little different, but just because it will be more like targeted and things. So it's kind of but it also takes time. It takes time to craft these things and be really thoughtful about how they look and what you're emphasizing, and trying to emphasize the benefits and the things and work-life balance, things that will be attractive to people, while also telling them about your organization, values of the organization. So it's like a lot to balance on a job posting, and kind of, but it tends to work better for the people directly involved with the hiring to craft that.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that makes sense in terms of like, I would rather hear about a job from a person who's currently doing that job or doing a job similar to that, than someone who's removed. But then, of course, like you're saying, there are these other elements that we, as those providers or as directors of those departments, might not know all the details of, like the benefits, et cetera. So, but that makes sense to overall have sort of the people who are doing the job be the ones sharing or crafting those job postings. Did anyone else want to share before we jump into content? All right, great, cool. I'm going to share my screen. Great. So yeah, our first bit of content around this is specifically about marketing and branding. So of course, I think we all have this idea of what a brand is, but a brand is made up of the perceptions of its touch points. It's an image built of opinions, reputation, and perceived characteristics. So every organization has a brand, whether it's intentionally created or not, and experiences and interactions with an organization's facility, service, website, employees, etc. All of these are the things that shape a brand, and shape that brand image every day. So although the shaping occurs naturally, branding techniques can really help us guide that in a favorable direction. So branding is traditionally associated with companies that are selling a product, of course, but it's also a really key tool that can have a strong impact with our service-oriented industries. And in healthcare, an organization's image can be very influential. And in addition to having that potential to attract more patients, of course, and therefore funding, which in turn could be the difference between layoffs and cutbacks, or a thriving institution that really helps to improve our community's health and offer those good jobs. It also, a big part of that is about how we appear as a brand to potential hires and to those folks who already work within our organization. And its identity can really direct the behavior of employees as well, and again, help attract that top talent, which is then vital to the institution's success. And the job market continues to have some volatility, but we do know that overall the job market is steadying, and so more talent is being snapped up. And so now's a good time to take a look at how your facility brands itself as an employer. So what's the message that we're getting out to prospective clients? And we want to make sure, of course, as always, that we're communicating our mission, vision, and values, and highlighting that company culture in all our recruitment content, including paid ads, blog posts, job descriptions, career pages, etc. So it's important to add a human touch to your careers page. You can do that with photos of current staff, different work activities, like if you do a summer gathering or something like that, individual bios of folks if they're willing to have those on there, and try to include testimonials or even videos from that your staff, nurses, nursing assistants, providers, front desk staff, all those folks, to promote the positive work culture that you have. And you also want to examine your facility from the candidate's perspective. So if someone were to research you and your organization, what would they find? You should be checking in on, like, if you have a residency program, you should check in on resident feedback from review sites. And also you can and should be conducting surveys of your own, and then you can kind of pull quotes from those, anonymized, of course. And ask employees for their thoughts on how to improve your employer branding and communicate it more effectively as well, of saying, like, hey, what do you know about, like, what our reputation is out in the world, and, like, how could we improve that? But yeah, we want to be making sure that we have this, that we're including thinking about our brand as we're working on crafting our job postings, etc.
And Helen, do you mind if I just include one small thing?
Yeah.
'Cause I've heard this several times where when candidates are looking for jobs, just like Helen said, people go on the website, they check out the organization, and a lot of times we only see the leadership posted on there. You don't see the rest of the staff. And it speaks really positively for an organization if, when they list out their staff, they really do include everyone. It doesn't have to be a bio of everyone or anything like that, but that the organization is being intentional, showing that equity across the board, that they really do value everyone regardless of their position, not solely the board or the top leadership. So that's something that you can use as a really great recruitment tool for how your culture is at the organization.
For sure. And if you're at an organization like Sharon was mentioning, having like over 700 employees, like maybe that's not feasible, but still thinking about beyond, like Michelle is saying, beyond the board, beyond those in the C-suite, and including other folks so that people can get sort of a picture of who's working at your organization, what are their roles, what kind of, you can include like managers or even just like a list of different departments. There are ways to be creative even when we might not necessarily, again, be able to list all 700 people, etc. I think I kind of covered this in terms of in the last slide, but it's, I just want to drive home that it is really important to be engaging in marketing and branding. And effective marketing and branding can really highlight a lot of good things about your organization. So this is what you're doing, again, not necessarily as directly part of your job announcements, but again, it's part of that overarching, like, what is your reputation and how can we show that? And so again, like, if I see a job that I'm potentially applying to, the first thing I do is go to that organization's website. And so as part of our overall brand and how we're making it clear, like, what we are as an organization and what we value, the marketing and branding is really a big part of it. And it can show, like it says on the slide, that commitment to justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, pay equity, professional development, employee successes, work-life balance, your mission-driven culture, your community impact and innovation, and other so many more things. So this is, again, it's that broader overall piece of, like, how are you developing your brand and your reputation and what people within the community think of you. And Michelle and I were just looking at Chicane's website, which is the New York Primary Care Association. And right up top, they have this piece that says, like, we're committed to equity and inclusion, like, click here to find out more. And you click on it and it talks about their commitments to justice, equity, and inclusion. It talks about that pay equity piece. And it's like, it's right front and center, where you can't go to this website without being like, oh, they're saying right away what their values are. And that's, an organization I would want to work for. So that's our little bit on marketing. and branding. But of course,
I put
yeah,
the example in the chat, Helen.
nice.
Yep,
Okay,
so
great.
it's on
Perfect.
there.
Yeah, I guess I should probably have the chat open. Um, yeah, Sharon, that'd be great. So yeah, now we want to talk about crafting those job announcements. So this gets more into the minutia and the specifics of your job announcements versus like your overall brand and how people perceive you. So of course, it's really important to write those ads in advance. Again, like Michelle was talking about earlier, this should be part of what that recruitment team is involved in. So again, like Jay was saying, like we can have people from the team that we're recruiting for in on those conversations, as well as HR, as well as leadership. But we want to make sure that we have, having a good template is good, and then we can customize each ad for each position we're hiring for, and also thinking about each media outlet, whether it's on social media or if we're posting it to Indeed or if we're posting it to a primary care association, job board, or whatever. But if we have the baseline template, we're going to save ourselves a lot of time in the long run. And yeah, again, like it says, we're going to save ourselves time. It's important to think about how the language we're using and how we're writing it to be compelling. So highlight the health center. What makes it unique? What would make someone want to work at your organization? And part of this is you can think about like, why do you work at your organization? What made you choose that? And you could also ask other people again of like, hey, what do you think makes our health center unique? And include that within there. Highlight the community. So thinking too about like, why would someone want to work where we work? Why would someone want to live here? Who are the people we're serving? And beyond just saying like, oh yeah, it's mission driven work, but like we can get down to brass tacks. We can get into specifics about what that mission actually means in practice and how we are serving this community. And then again, thinking about the benefits and positives of your health center, like I said, sort of right there at the top of highlighting it is like, what makes your organization a great place to work? Think about how do you show that you're invested in your employees? Include that in your job posting. So here are some tips. And again, of course, we always want our PowerPoints to be resources to you. So I highly encourage you to, as you're writing your job postings, you can bring up these few slides and just be like, continuously thinking about them. So do include your mission, explain who your patient population is. We know, especially with behavioral health folks, a lot of them have studied with a specific population in mind. So I'll use my colleague Michelle as an example. She studied with working with veterans specifically in mind. And so if that is a population that comes to your health center, especially for their behavioral health needs, that's something that if you included that on the job posting, she, as a doctor of social work, would be extra interested in applying for that position. And it's not to say that people like that Michelle or whoever would only want to work with that position or with that population, but we can highlight that so that people who have that special interest can have that special spark. Or again, like we know a lot of folks are especially interested in working with unhoused populations or with trans youth and families. So we can say like, who's our population? And again, no group is a monolith and no health center serves only, specifically one group, but we do know that there are health centers that are funded for specific populations. And beyond that, like, who your community is. So you can say like, yes, we serve people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and we have this special focus on refugees and immigrants or whatever it is. And then answer that why question. So getting to why does your health center value its patient population and community, you can tie that into, maybe you have an interesting history of how your health center started, or who the founders were and why they thought, hey, like this is a space that really needs this, etc. But kind of bringing in those compelling reasons. Again, talk about how your health center cares for its workforce. You can mention like professional development opportunities, the ways that you work. Don't just say like we ensure a work-life balance, but talk about the ways that you ensure that there's work-life balance, etc., highlighting those benefits. And then, of course, include a salary range. I know that later on in this learning collaborative, you'll be focusing more on that compensation piece, but just in terms of including it in your job postings, it is so important, especially now, to include salary ranges. And I know a lot of states are requiring that. In Colorado, where I live, it's a requirement. I believe Oregon, it's a requirement as well, and there are some others. So like, instead of sort of dragging our feet, we should join the states that are already doing it. And a big part of why, there's a few different reasons. Like, it's an equity thing. If we aren't saying upfront what we're willing to pay people, then we run the risk of perpetuating inequity. And as you know, health centers with the privilege of coming from this social justice movement, we don't want to be part of perpetuating injustice. But then there's also the practical piece of like saving yourself time and energy. Personally, as a millennial, proud millennial, I don't apply to jobs that don't have a salary range because I don't know if it's worth my time. And also, again, getting to that justice, social justice, and Jedi piece, it says something to me about like, oh, if they're not willing to share this, they're not living by best practices around this. And like, maybe they have something to hide, and that is like a red flag for me right away. But yeah, so it'll help you get the candidates you actually want. It'll make sure that it's saving you time in case someone applies and they're great and you're like, yes, we definitely want this person. And then what you can offer is not what they were expecting and they're not willing to take the job. Like, you just wasted all that time looking at that person's resume and interviewing them, etc. Or vice versa. If someone's like, oh no, I'm not ready to take on a position that pays this much, like that's a whole conversation about like, why do people think that shouldn't get paid more? But it's still worthwhile to think about. Like, if I were offered a job that paid more than I think I am worth, again, I probably wouldn't take it because I'd be nervous that I couldn't live up to their expectations. So again, we're just being transparent, we're saving ourselves time, and we are living the mission and values of our organizations by not perpetuating inequity.
Helen, I did want to add to that. I'm sorry, like
No, go for it.
jumping in, because we have heard this also from other health centers when we've done some of our recruitment and retention workshops. Some of the places where you post will do like an estimated salary range for that position. I see some of you shaking your head yes, and there have been situations where health centers, they had exactly what Helen was talking about, a great candidate come through. There was a lot of time, money invested into all that. And then right at the end, when they talked about salary, it did not work out because the person was going under the assumption of that salary range that was estimated, but the health center's salary was actually lower than that. So it created a big disconnect around that. So that's why we also really, really highly recommend it. Just it cuts down on so many potential issues that may arise later on. And for those of you who can't do it, what we have said is if for some reason you really cannot do the salary range in your job announcement, talk about salary in that immediate first phone call, interview, whatever it is. That should be one of the first things that you talk about with the candidate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Michelle, for bringing that up. Here's some more tips that's important to take a strengths-based perspective. So think about what you're hoping this position or whoever will fill this position will really bring to your team, and have that be sort of the perspective that you're writing from. It's important to avoid that language that connotes a burnout environment of like, we're under pressure, it's a fast-paced environment. So many of those things, I think we all know to read them coded as like, we're going to burn you out, good luck. And that's not an organization that we want to apply for. So you want to think about, again, of course, you want to create an environment where we aren't burning people out, but then utilize that language that shows like we are again, don't use things like family, because again, we all know to read that as like, oh, I'm going to be exploited and taken advantage of. That's what families do. But thinking instead about like, we are a supportive team that works together to meet the challenges of our day feels very different than like, it's an environment in which you need to be able to handle pressure. Like, those are two sides of the same coin in terms of like, yes, there are challenges, but we support each other, versus like, good frickin' luck, deal with it. It's also important to avoid gendered language. There's so many words in our language that we don't even think about necessarily how they are gendered. And there is a great tool, I believe it's from MIT, and I don't have it at the ready, but either someone from my team can try to grab it, or if not, I'll put it in the discussion board. But you can post your job postings into it, and it's an AI that can help you sort of like pull out and say like, oh, this is a gendered way to talk about this. So yeah, be careful to think about that, of like so many words we use, we don't mean to be saying like, oh, we need a masculine person, but the words we use end up saying that, and then that's a huge turnoff for a lot of really qualified candidates, regardless of their gender. This one, you would think we wouldn't need to say it, but it's important to check grammar, spelling, and sentence structure and use clear language. One of the things that we often do here at the Star Center is we will review people's job postings for them. And I can't tell you how many I've gotten that just have like baseline grammatical mistakes. And we all know that like how we use language and grammar, there are some problems in terms of like classism around that. And that's a conversation worth having. And also, when you're looking for a job, part of what you're looking for and looking at is whether the environment that you would be joining is like put together and thoughtful and had enough time to review their job postings. And so again, I think not everyone necessarily, but to certain people, when we see those kinds of like easy baseline mistakes happening, again, it's a red flag in terms of like, oh, did they not have enough, like a person to put a second set of eyes on this and just do a quick proofread on it, or whatever it is. So like, take that time, use your spell check, and you want to look clean and put together. Use an employee or like a user-friendly application process. This is another one we hear so much. There are like memes about this on the internet because it happens so much, of people asking for a resume, and then their application process has you put exactly what was in your resume, but like through the application process as well. Don't make people do both. One or the other, and honestly, probably just the resume. So think about that. Think about like, can someone just email their documents straight to an actual email address where it will be received, and they will receive a, hey, thanks so much for submitting. We'll take a look at this and let you know what the next steps are. Make it so that it's easy for people to get their applications in. Because again, if people are applying to the position at your organization, they're applying to a lot of positions. And if they reach a barrier where it's like, oh, this is hard, that's a reason to give up on this application. You want to make it personal. So again, think about the reasons that you work at that organization. Think about ask other people and sort of infuse it with that joy and that personality. And then you can make it creative. This is a space where you can, make a joke, share activities that are close by and that are exciting, etc. For clinical postings, definitely make sure that you're using the right clinical terminology. And this, again, is a great place to be utilizing that person from the department, the behavioral health department in this case, that you're looking for a position for, and run it by them. Make sure that they have the opportunity to include, what this position actually is, what kind of modalities we use, what kind of therapies we engage in, etc. Because again, if someone is applying to a position and they see like, oh, these people don't actually even know what they're talking about, that's going to be a reason that for them not to apply. Again, only ask for what you need. If you don't actually look at cover letters, and a lot of people don't ask for them. Or if you, you could even say like, only include like work experience within the last 10 years, etc. Or, whatever it is, but don't ask for things. Don't ask your prospective employees, prospective applicants to do more work than you're going to engage with. Make sure that things are accessible. There are tons of different tools around this. Word includes an accessibility reader, as does Adobe. You want to make sure that as you're posting things that they could be read by a screen reader, etc., different things like that. make sure that there's a contact person in case someone has questions or wants to follow up and make sure that their resume or their application was received. I know this one's tough given that I was just like, include all this stuff, but be brief while including that substance. Like, we don't want to ask people to read a novel. Yeah, go for it, Michelle.
And Helen, actually, I think this goes really well with the question that Emily asked in the chat. So Emily said, what would you recommend for a job posting that uses almost too technical language or too wordy? What would you recommend for a job posting? Yeah, so I think you're looking at where is that balance? And I think that's what this bullet point hits at. So it's really important, especially if, Helen, can you go back just one slide when a lot of the wording that is more of where it says here, like the burnout environment, under pressure, a lot of those more vague terms really ends up creating a much more wordy job posting than you really need. So what we say is, the technical language is really important because it's going to show that you understand the job and what you're trying to hire for. But really just write what you expect them to do on a regular basis, not including all these extra adjectives, all of those things. Like, what do you, when this person comes in and they look at this job announcement, what is exactly that they would be doing? And you will find actually many times that will create a less wordy job posting, but you do need to be very thoughtful about the technical language, because certain things, and then yeah, Helen, if you could just go back, sorry. It's really important that the terminology is correct. So it is a balance between all that, but the more objective that you can just clearly be, surprised how it actually ends up being a lot less wordy.
Yeah. I mean, you can even say like, we use these modalities, blah, 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 blah. And that's not very wordy, but it will still, again, showcase that you know what you're talking about, you know what you're looking for, and will hopefully help you get candidates that know what you're talking about and are what you're looking for. Yeah. And then along the lines of all of this, just be respectful of your applicant's time. Again, if they're submitting something to you, they're submitting things to other places, and make sure that we're following up with people. If it's not the right candidate, it might not be the right candidate for this position, but that doesn't mean it's not the right candidate in the future. So it's still important to say like, hey, thanks so much for submitting your application. We are going in a different direction for this position, but like, we encourage you to continue to apply as positions become available. If that's the case, obviously don't encourage someone to apply that you would never hire, but yeah, just be thoughtful and respectful of people who are, I just helped my sister apply for a position, and together we spent probably like 16 hours on the phone, editing her resume, thinking about different things. 16 is maybe an exaggeration. But we put time and love and energy into applications, and so be respectful of that when people do it. I'm going to try to speed things up because, let's be honest, we're running out of time. Of course, it's important, as always, to include that DEI lens on everything you do. And part of this is to include a DEI statement. And this should be something that you're developing as part of your general JEDI or DEI work. But then once you have it, you can include it in every job posting. And the example is from Central City Concern, which is a healthcare for the homeless health center in Portland, Oregon. Some other ways that you can make sure that we're including that DEI lens is to highlight your inclusive benefits, make sure you're sharing your needs accommodations, and make sure that you're, again, all kinds of, if we say out loud and specifically the ways that we are being inclusive, people will see that. So that includes benefits, leave policies, accommodations, mentorships, etc. It's also important to think about where you're advertising. So this is a list of some places that you can work to sort of increase the diversity of the applicants you're getting. This list is from a toolkit made by the Star Center in partnership with a couple other NTAPs, but it's from the Building an Inclusive Organization Toolkit, which once you get the sides, that thing there at the bottom is it's a hyperlink, so you can check it out. But this is just a beginning list of thinking of places that we can be posting those to make sure that we're increasing the diversity of our candidates. Within the Comprehensive Workforce Plan template, which was newly updated, there is this place where you can create your template for the job announcements, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of like you want to have the template and then you'll update it as you go, depending on the position and where you're posting it. So we highly encourage you to check this out and then utilize that as you're creating those templates for yourself. We should all be using social media already. You should have an active presence online, but it's important to think about where it makes sense to focus your dollars depending on what the content you're using. And by dollars, I actually more mean time, because as we know, a lot of social media use is actually free. But this is a place where we can be building that brand through Instagram and Facebook and on LinkedIn as well. But then when we're posting jobs, we're focusing more on places where people go to look for jobs, like LinkedIn. And then also, this is a place where you can be encouraging that recruiting team to be connecting with people, of like, if you see someone engaging with your content, or if as you're looking through, you see someone that you're like, hey, you'd be a great fit, that recruitment team can reach out and say like, hey, we have a job we'd like for you to, like, we looked at your LinkedIn profile and we'd love for you to apply for this job. And that doesn't take very long, but that personal touch like feels amazing. So highly recommend utilizing social media to your benefit. Again, as we've kind of already talked about, it's really important that we're sort of shifting away from this idea of like, oh, like begging people to work with us, and also this idea of like, we're not doing well. I used to work in like political activism and fundraising. And one of the things that you're always told to do is not to say like, oh, we desperately need your donation, but instead to say like, everybody's doing it. Everybody's getting on board with this ballot measure, or like everybody's doing, I used to work at my college's annual fund. I was like, the rest of your peers are really getting involved in this. And people are more drawn to that than they are to like desperation. I think that's probably true of all of us in the room, or most of us in the room. So instead of focusing on like this huge need, we're selling our brand. We're a great place to work. We serve our community. We are of value, and it is a privilege to work here. Do you want to be part of that? We're making a place both online and of course like physically. We also want to be actually building a culture that is fun to be part of. But we're allowing those candidates to find us, to come to us and say like, hey, this looks cool. They've got a good situation. They've clearly thought a lot about inclusion, about justice, equity, diversity, and about how they're utilizing their words. And this is a place where I could make a difference, and I would feel excited to be part of this place. So that's how we're shifting the focus, and that's what's important. I know that I just talked for a long time, but now we're going to talk about what you get to do next. So for those of you who haven't already completed it, we want you to complete the homework from that first assessment of the ACU self-assessment tool. And then the second assignment will be added to the discussion board later. And that's a job announcement template, the one that I showed earlier. And so you'll need to log into the discussion board to access all these materials. As Michelle and Mariah mentioned at the beginning of the Learning Collaborative, we're going to make sure that we're going to post some test posts, and we're going to make sure that everything's working. But everything should be on the discussion board later this week to make sure that you can access all of that. And then again, I know this was your homework for the first session, but we just wanted to make it really easy to access. So when you have the slides, you can click here, and then again, it will be listed as well. But we want to make sure that you're able to complete again if you hadn't completed that. And again, you should have a login. If that has been the technical issue, please feel free to reach out to Mariah. If not, again, we're going to be doing some troubleshooting on our discussion boards, but all the PowerPoints, the recordings, the resources, assignments, etc., all of that will be posted on the discussion board, and it lives there in perpetuity. So, if you're doing this, you're engaging in the Learning Collaborative, it's great, and you want to do all that, and then 2 years from now, you're like, oh, hey, there was a really good resource in that Learning Collaborative. It'll be there. You'll still have your login. You can still check in. You can always communicate with each other, ask questions of each other, what's working, what's not. You can ask us questions, etc. So with all that, both content and logistical information Anybody got any questions? I guess I should look at the chat.
Yeah, and I was putting a few things in the chat, like I mentioned, Idealist. It's a really great place to post nonprofit jobs. So if you haven't checked that out, would highly recommend it. Another thing too, I wanted to mention with the branding and like who you are as an organization, and maybe this is just specific to behavioral health or maybe not, but we're a really closely connected group. Like the people I studied with, I still talk to them, and we constantly share with each other what organizations are good to work with and what organizations are not. And we do this nationally. It isn't just where we're specifically located. I think there's like a really tight bond of knowing these are hard jobs to do. So that branding, the way that you're building that culture in your organization, all of those things can be very powerful because people in behavioral health are sharing that. And the people you currently have working in your organization are probably the best ambassadors for come work here. And this is why, or the opposite. So it's really important to think about that. I just wanted to share that while people thought about their questions.
And you can utilize that network. Of course, like we never want to be requiring that our staff engage with social media. But if you're posting for a new behavioral health position on LinkedIn, you can just sort of share it of saying like, hey, we just posted on LinkedIn about this. If y'all want to share with your professional networks, that would be great. And then that's a free way that we're utilizing the folks we already have and getting those applications out in front of candidates. So before we finish up, and again, feel free to type your questions in here, or if they come up, you can put them on the discussion board. But we would love if you would fill out the evaluation. It'll come up. It is now up as a poll within Zoom. It's really important for us to make sure that we are continuing to offer content that is meeting your needs, and we are funded to serve you, so we want to make sure that we're doing that well. And then of course we need to report it to FIRST as well.
Oh, and quick, I'm so sorry, Helen. If people want to submit the job announcements.
Oh yeah, okay. So again, I mentioned like one of the things we do is we're willing to take a look at your job announcements and offer some edits and some suggestions. So if you'd like to send those in, feel free. Michelle, should they just send them to you and then you can disperse them amongst the team? So yeah, feel free to just email any job announcements you'd like us to look at to Michelle. And this isn't just like, you don't have to do it right now, but basically to the end of the Learning Collaborative, we're open to receiving those, and even a little bit after. We know this is a quick turnaround Learning Collaborative. So if as you're creating those, you want to share them with us and just get some suggestions, edits, etc., we're happy to take a look at those. It's something that people have said to us they find very useful. So we're happy to do that. Our next session is Wednesday, November 1st, same bat time, same bat place. And we'll be talking about onboarding, mission, and culture. So please feel free to, again, reach out in the meantime, but until then, we hope to see you there. Of course, we always like to share our resources. We also have a workforce symposium coming up in the spring. If you want to start looking ahead to that and planning for that, we have lots of different ways to learn more, and you're welcome to sign up for our newsletter. Thank you all so much for coming. I really enjoyed chatting with all of you. I know I talk fast and say a lot, but I was very excited to present with you. And yeah, if you've filled out the evaluation, you're welcome to head out, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Or next week. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, folks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.